Want to do your thing, Sarah?
Yeah. Oh, you mean the Zoom tips?
I think we're good. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this afternoon's faculty forum discussion, which is a meeting of the faculty committee as a whole. I'm really glad that you could join us today. And what we have planned is really very much in the sort of theme of a forum, an opportunity to do some committee updates for the faculty committee, as well as to do some breakout discussions of some of the themes that have been discussed at the meetings. I do also want to share a little bit of information about the executive director search that's going on and some input that we would like to have from faculty. And finally, we're going to conclude with a discussion of next steps on the faculty survey workload working group that we want to get started and connect with all of you on. So with that, if you could turn to the slide to just share the agenda, Sarah, that would be great. So this just kind of gives you a sense of what our agenda is. We're going to start with committee updates in just a second, but our forum discussions, which we'll do after the committee updates, the idea will be for people to join a breakout room. And the way we have it set up just on your breakout rooms, we have room 1, room 2, room 3, and it's going to go right down the list of the topics. Room 1 will be NASM GWIR FDP engagement. Room 2 will be FDP program topics. Room 3 will be future of work and research. And I'll talk more about what that forum discussion will look like after our committee updates. So Sarah, you can let go of the slide for now. And we'll move forward with updates. So for those of you who are new to the faculty committee or haven't been to a forum in a while, one of the things that we often do when we're in our in-person meeting is we have a faculty business meeting in which we have an opportunity to hear from faculty members who have roles at the FDP that are either co-chair of a committee, liaison of a committee, co-chair of a working group, or a liaison to a working group. And we share that information back with the faculty to make sure that faculty participants in the FDP are aware of the activities that are going on. And of course, all of you have the opportunity as well to listen to committee updates, as well as to see what's going on in the program. But sometimes it's really useful for us to hear where faculty are being represented and kind of how our voice is connecting to the way in which that committee work is being done. So because we haven't done that in quite some time, we're going to take a little bit of time at the beginning of our forum today for those updates. No pressure for those of you who don't want to share, and this is not meant to be a formal presentation so much as conversational. So I'm going to start with Jason because he volunteered prior to the meeting to talk about what's going on with infrastructure. And if you have questions, let's keep it really informal. Please feel free to jump in if you have comments or questions.
Thanks, Michelle, and hello to everybody. Looking forward to in person at some point in the near future, I hope. So the infrastructure committee has been focused recently on trying to implement some of the recommendations that came from a working group on volunteer engagement and the nominating process. And over the past few months, we've been working with the executive committee on developing a timeline and process by which we might try to engage members in different committee leadership structures. As an example, and I presented on this a couple FDPs ago, that report, all of our committees right now operate somewhat in an ad hoc appointment process. There are some that obviously have to go through approval with the executive committee at certain leadership levels, but there's really a wide range of ways that people work their way into a leadership position. And so one of the things we are doing is benchmarking against other professional societies and going to be making some recommendations for the executive committee to consider around time of service, for example, maybe like something like a regular 3-year term and then a one-time renewal process, but some sort of expectations for each of the committees, subcommittees, and working groups, as well as asking each committee, subcommittee, and working group to define their size and basic structure. So there are some that have a very well dialed in structure of, co-chairs and a certain number of members, and others that have committees that range from 4, 5, 6 people to north of 20 to 30 to 40, depending upon the committee. So we want to give each committee a chance to look at their structure, what makes sense, make some recommendations on the size of their committee, and then start to develop a regular process by which people can volunteer to get into a leadership position, and maybe try to align it so that there's one FDP meeting per year when we vote, if we have to vote or assign these committee chairs, and start to get into a rotation. Now, one of the things about making those structures overly rigid is, what do you do when somebody leaves and you need some replacement? And so the infrastructure committee is also collecting input from the executive committee on what that would look like to appoint somebody in an interim role on a committee until that next review cycle came around. So right now we're trying to pull together a document. I co-chair that with Lynette. So I'm the faculty rep and Lynette is the admin rep. And we're working with the membership committee as well as the EC to try to get something pulled together for some reaction and feedback. That's my update, Michelle.
Okay, thank you, Jason. Michelle is answering another question real quick, so I am going to moderate here shortly. Anyone, do you have any questions related to the committee related activities that Jason just described for us? If you do, please unmute yourself. You have the capabilities of doing that, and you can ask him now. Anyone? We're good with that. Term limits are a good thing, Jason. Whenever anyone is ready for me to not be vice chair, I will be more than happy to recommend you for this role as well. But I love it, so it's fine. All right, thank you so much. George, do you want to provide an update related?
Sure. I'm the faculty liaison on the communications committee, which is a very busy committee. There's always a lot going on, but right now, as part of the strategic planning process, there's a lot of activity around the Vanguard company, who is helping us with the strategic plan and to develop a website. Everything is under review, the logos, the standards, the structure of material. One of the things that we discussed in our last meeting had to do with how do we guide people, particularly faculty who apparently need guidance, to what are the sessions, whenever they, instead of just saying this session covers subject of subcontracts, or this session covers the subject of animal care, put some things in that will give people an idea. This would be very interesting to faculty. This would be more interesting to administrative personnel. This would be more interesting to the technical personnel. Not that people couldn't figure that out on their own, but trying to provide some guidance in that regard, and especially in the structure of presentations. The communications committee is all about templates, providing templates for presenters to give us all kinds of information, and sort of in the same structure so that people can easily understand it. Another thing that's coming up, Michelle was talking earlier about the Great Resignation session, and this is of interest to communications. Communications committee has a regular quarterly article in the Encura magazine, and they are very interested in people's perspectives on the Great Resignation. This is of real concern to administrative personnel, and particularly senior administrative personnel, who are trying to fill positions in their operations, but they would be very interested in hearing from some of us about how the Great Resignation affects faculty. In my case, it's just that we don't have any staff. But if anyone wants me to pass information on to Stephanie Scott and the rest of the committee, they'd be very interested in hearing from us. There are not many faculty engaged in the communications committee, and I guess I'm the only one who goes to the executive meetings of the communication committee. But there's been a lot of work leading up to this meeting and beyond, especially with respect to the strategic planning.
No, that's excellent, George. And one thing I will note is that one of the 3 breakout rooms that we have is related to you soliciting information and comments from faculty related to the Great Resignation. So we'll have 3 different breakout rooms. We'll show that slide shortly, and one of them is going to be particularly related to that topic. And I think that will be incredibly insightful for you to be able to take back. Thank you for that update. Thank you for the strategic plan the communications group is working on. Thank you for all your work with that group. It's critical activity.
There appears to be a question from Rakesh. Please go ahead.
George, what does one convey back to one's university about the value of participating for a faculty member, the value to the university of participating in FDP meetings? And I would be interested in knowing what other faculty representatives do with what they listen to or hear at these meetings.
Well, that's a good point. I think I've raised that with the communications committee a number of times. They're hoping to, well, they always do at each meeting, prepare a whole set of session summaries that are all available on the website. What some people do, I used to send out for lack of a better word, a blurb, but more often than not, we just have a little thing that has a link to the sessions and a very brief summary from my perspective. A lot of people do different things. The suggestion that I've heard is a lot of people engage with their faculty senate if they have one. I engage with the research advisory committee, but the faculty senate in a lot of universities is a place that people send that information to. But it's all available in the session summaries, which are done at each meeting.
Well, I listen to those summaries again after the meeting, and I make a further summary of interest to different people in the university, and I convey that message to them and also give them the links if they want to get a first-hand idea of what happened here at these meetings. But I'd like to know if anyone else does anything different.
Yeah. Well, one of the things on the communication committee, just one more thought is, and this had come up in the committee report yesterday, is one of our goals is to, what's the right word, tell the best story about FDP and its value to the community, both from the perspective of administrators and faculty. And they've been producing, and I know Kelly has been involved in that from our perspective. They've been producing brochures that can be sent out to the VP research office and the like that talks about FDP and its value.
And I think that.
Yeah. One last question. Do you know if the administrative representatives do the same as the faculty representatives do? Do they convey the same message, or they don't convey a message, or do they convey a different message?
I don't know.
So I was going to try to answer all of your questions because it really runs the gamut. So ideally, in excellent set of questions. Ideally, what would happen is that FDP is structured to be a think tank and a kind of a sandbox with our federal representatives and administrative representatives on reducing faculty and administrative burden. But in this form, let's just say faculty burden. right? Understanding where the federal representatives and our federal entities that support research are going, where with policy, and being able to rub shoulders with them to resolve issues. What would be ideal? And so I'm going to go into ideal state just for a second. What would be ideal is, since you were appointed by the IO or vice president for research, information back to that IO and the forum for which that they convene, which is typically the associate deans for research or department heads, in partnership with the VPR would be very important. I would also elevate your role on your campus by, I guess, attributing or aligning concerns. And we used to call it, I know this is being recorded, many years ago I was in Texas, so I'll use Texas vernacular. We always wanted to know where did policies come from, or if it was locally, we called it a libs, locally implemented bullshit, right? And so we needed to know if the policy was something that was being supported by the federal government, or it was the interpretation of the administration on how they were putting more constraints on the way that business was done. So your liaison role with that is that you're representing your institution and the institutional faculty to collect information, distribute information and collect information on things that are just perplexing to the faculty, hopefully in conjunction with the admin team, but in partnership with the institution, and bring things back to this faculty forum so that we can call the right people as part of our colleagues and partners in the federal agencies to talk about issues for which that we're experiencing, to try to get to a point of understanding and clarity about where it's coming from and why it's there. And is it local? Is it federal? Is it required, et cetera? So but I think the challenge is, and it's not all on George with the communications committee, I think the challenge is that we have tried, right? We've tried over the years to kind of walk a process in place at our various institutions, but it really, I think we could probably do better to set ourselves up for the faculty reps to truly be liaisons. And I think we even wrote a job description for the faculty representative and how ways to engage. Those things happen. We should have more discussions related to what are you hearing from your institution? What do you need our help with to get integrated into the infrastructure and to be the liaison that it's intended to be? So it's not all on communications, it's infrastructure, it's everything that we do should be angled in that way so that we can maximize the sandbox for solution.
Thank you.
I want to
This
recognize,
is very helpful.
yeah, I want to recognize John Hildebrand, who had his hand up earlier.
Actually, Robert touched on the main point I wanted to make, but I'll just put a word to it. We have this initiative called FACT, which is meant to bring faculty and administrative reps together. And I thought that one of the aspirations of that was to sort of build almost a team spirit from a given institution, which I would hope raise the profile of FDP in home institutions, and by the law of mass action, maybe increase the perceived importance in the home institution. I'm fortunate that Lori Schultz is I think on this call, and I don't have to persuade Lori, and between the two of us, we make a lot of noise about FDP at our institution. And of course, Kelly's married to his administrative rep, so he's all set. But, for most of us, we might not be talking regularly with our administrative or technical reps. And I think through FACT or the spirit of FACT, we should be trying to build a local team spirit. That's all I wanted to add to the chat.
I agree entirely with you. Yeah.
Yeah. So let me put my faculty rep, my additional faculty rep, the original faculty rep before I came here on the spot, and ask Jeff Sands, because I prioritize his emails as the vice president for research at Emory, that if he needs something, I jump to making sure that I could pave the way. But Jeff, what else could we do? What else could I do personally related to what I just described as elevating the role of, because we have 2 faculty reps, I'm one, you're one, your role as faculty rep for Emory University?
Well, it's a good question. I think yeah, in the past, before you had come to Emory, Robert, there was a faculty advisory committee to David, and so through that committee, I could report to David. Holly, the administrative rep, was there. There was really that forum for dissemination and discussion, and so maybe some version of that. As far as I know, we never actually communicated to the faculty senate. I was on the faculty senate, and I never recall anybody coming to present there, but that would be another, I've heard others mention it, maybe some report that goes there. But I think perhaps it's more to get some of the key faculty with a committee that like used to, of course, no, back then there was lunch too. So that's hasn't happened in over 2 years. So you have to send us DoorDash or something.
We do. Stephen, I want you to jump in and share more about FACT.
Glad to. And John, I appreciate those comments about FACT. Actually, a few years back, those of you who remember when Mark Hasselkorn was doing this, he would always say that, when he started coming, that's, I come to these meetings and I see Lynette was on, and I don't know who my admin rep is. And then eventually it was, I come to these meetings, it's the only time I see my admin rep. So actually that is how FACT got started, was to try to build that. And I think one of the things we've done is really found out that that home piece is a major piece that's kind of very important. And while there is a lot, I'm going to go out and say there's a lot of avenues for the research admin to communicate with each other in various societies, various meetings, even amongst themselves at the home institution. There's very few places where faculty come and sit in on those types of discussions and interact with the reps. And I think what's really interesting to hear is how those interactions go on at different institutions. And that is one of the things FACT is meant to bring to the table, is what are people doing at their different institutions to really strengthen the collaboration between the research administrative staff that we interact with and count on, and then conversely, how do they interact with the faculty? So yeah, that is the nature of FACT, and we are going to have a session right after this, actually an informal session right after this.
I really appreciate that and the discussion on this issue. I think you touched on something really important, Stephen, and that is that the nature of faculty participation. I think we all understand this in the FDP is so much different for us than it is for our administrative colleagues, and we need to acknowledge how hard our colleagues work in this space, which is their professional arena. We have professional arenas in our academic societies, and therein lies, it's almost like being an ambassador, if you will, back to the faculty from the research administration focused conversations that we have here. And I think anything we can do to encourage each other on what are the salient things to take out of the meeting that are going to have resonance with our faculty colleagues, in addition to, of course, having that close knit team with our administrative and technical reps who come to the FDP as really their touchstone for their careers. I think that's the thing we're always trying to find. For those of you who were not able to join the session that John Hildebrand engaged in earlier with Greg Sims about the NAS, I think for many of us, that connection to the national academies, at least from the faculty perspective, is a really big connector for us, because the academies themselves represent more of where faculty engagement lies. And I think the more that we can do to amplify that relationship and build it out, and I thought there were some very good suggestions at the end of that meeting the more I think we benefit and are able to bring something back as a conduit to our faculty, which is why we want to get to our breakout discussions to see what people think we might be able to do building on that session. So I appreciate this, and there are lots and lots of comments coming in through the chat. So I encourage you to add your 2 cents to that discussion. And then I want to make sure we have time for some remaining updates before we jump into our breakout. So Jerry, I know you've got to jump off the meeting shortly. Do you and maybe Neil want to jump in on JAD?
Yeah, thanks. And it's always good to have Neil there because he keeps me honest. Unfortunately, our university schedules things that conflict with this meeting, and I apologize. But so there's not a lot to talk about with JAD. I think the broad interest, but a couple of things that are important is one is the grants.gov contract changed so that for the last, for most of this year, we have essentially a whole new group that we're dealing with. And I think it's taken a while for that to level out to where the interaction is getting better. I wouldn't say it's the same as the last group because it's different people. Neil, do you agree?
I agree. Yeah, it's changed enormously, I would say,
Yeah.
over the past while, and it's been a little slow getting off the ground. I fully agree.
I don't think that they were exactly sure what we were all about and how to interact with us, but I do think it's getting better. So there's only a couple of operational things that I think are important. Is there's a huge amount of technical stuff, but one of the things that affects everybody is the universal entity identifier that has replaced SAM numbers or DUNS numbers on all the grants. And so if any of you deal with the physical aspects of grant submission, you'll notice that DUNS numbers are disappearing almost completely, and universal UEIs is the term, have replaced them. There's a number of operational updates for grants.gov. I don't think that they impact a lot. They do in some kind of utility, but it hasn't been anything that's major or saved a lot of time, I think. And so those are, I think in the future, there's talk about migration to a cloud platform, but I haven't seen what that means. Neil, do you know any more about that? Or is that just like in the cloud? We can't hear you. You'll have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, sorry about that. I'm on a phone because I've got a problem with my laptop. Yeah, no, I'm not any more aware of. I mean, there's some future plans to try to improve, I guess is the right term, grants.gov operation, enable it to run on different types of platforms. And I think obviously web-based is one piece of that, but no, I'm no more knowledgeable than you, maybe less.
Yeah, I think because we're all Zooming, the opportunities to test fly some of these things that we had in the past has not been there. So I know less about it. And I think that's about it. Anything else? Did I leave anything out?
No, I don't think so. I think we're not meeting as frequently. Part of it is just, you know, a lot of new people, as you pointed out.
Yeah.
And it's going to take a little while for the group to gel.
I do want to point out, however, Michelle and Robert, is that our university is currently searching for a new vice president for research. And I hold all the candidates up to your standards. And I was really happy to get the Great Resignation because it assured me that since none of them come up to your standards, that maybe it's just the way things are these days and not otherwise. So with that, I'm going to have to go and talk to our university about their new liberal arts requirements.
Well, we're in competition with you as well. We're also looking for a VPR, sadly.
Well, you can have the two that I heard.
We're earlier in our search.
Okay, bye.
Thank you so much, Jerry. Robert, do you want to share a word about the evaluation working group?
Yeah, it's hard to follow that comment though. I will say that and now it's being supported with Jason Carter and team, who did start a fellowship training individuals who are aspiring to be VPRs and have a fellowship program with under APLU and a summer program. So if institutions are really looking for vice presidents for research, we've cultivated a whole team of individuals that know holistically about a comprehensive research enterprise, and it would be a good place to tap into. Okay, so having said that, let me give you a quick update related to the Valuation Working Group. Where we are, and I gave an update yesterday during the committee meeting, but where we really are is really aligning to set up a request for information or an RFP process. The procurement process for FDP wasn't fully established, and this is an ongoing relationship that requires a procurement process. We're receiving more funds from the federal government in terms of support, and the nature of the support that will occur with the Evaluation Working Group should be aligned with the Executive Committee and the Oversight Committee that we have for the strategic plan activities. It's very important to work holistically. And so a lot of discussions have been occurring since our last meeting related to how do we truly integrate an external evaluation team for an evaluation center to be aligned with our Executive Committee and the Oversight Committee. And it's going to be critical because what we know to be true is what is not measured doesn't get counted, and we need to align measurement with the areas for which that we need to document success back to our sponsorship of FDP, and that is exactly what we're working on. So within the next 2 weeks, since we just resolved the procurement activities and needs and established the process that we will implement, there will be an RFP released for a quick review period, and gaining valuable information will down select and identify an evaluation center that FDP will be working with this summer, and a plan that will be presented to the group in September. So that's where we are for the summer work of the Evaluation Working Group. Any questions related to that before we jump into breakout rooms? Anybody have any questions?
I am posting in the chat what the breakout rooms are, and Sarah's going to do it, but I'll have it there as a reference. One is NASM, National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine, GWER FDP engagement, building on the session earlier for those of you who were able to join. The second is FDP program topics. And the third is future of work and research. So before you jump into the group, it's a really simple exercise. We're going to give you 15 minutes to talk about what you think could be brought forward related to those topics to the FDP. So as an example, in the last session, in the session earlier this afternoon, about sort of the NAS GWER FDP connections, there were a number of suggestions that Greg Sims laid out as possible areas for collaboration and kind of growing the relationship with the national academies. I'd really be interested, for those of you who are interested in that topic, to learn more about what you think might be some of those opportunities. We're always looking for FDP program topics. We haven't had a conversation about that as a group in a really long time. And I think, you know, to the point of this discussion in our updates thus far, I mean, just kind of building on our updates thus far, it really is important for us as faculty to be able to lay out what we think would be of interest to faculty in our engagement at the FDP. So that'll be what the second breakout room is. It'll just be labeled number 2. And finally, the third breakout is dealing with the future of work and research, building on the theme that was introduced yesterday of how we're dealing with the Great Resignation, retirement, remote working, and renegotiation of jobs discussion that is out there based on the data that I think was shared from Lisa Nichols and her colleagues, as well as the survey that Kira put together, in which they were looking specifically at remote work and how that might be affecting the research staff workforce. I think there's a parallel conversation to be had around the faculty experience. And so for those of you who are interested in that topic, please join breakout 3. And so with that, the idea is to go to the breakout rooms and have that conversation. I will personally be joining the breakout session on the future of work. If I could have Robert join the session on topics, and if I could tap John a little bit further today in the NASM and Academy, the Academy and FDP relationship conversation, I would be forever indebted to you for doing that. So with that, I'm going to send you off to your groups. If you're having any trouble getting into your groups, then we can help you do that manually. So let's go ahead and move into them.
If any of you guys are having any issues with the breakout rooms, just let us know. You can also type which room you want to go to in the chat and we can move you.
Sarah, can you do us the favor, Sarah or Moises, do us the favor of returning everybody to the main room?
Yeah, the breakout rooms, everyone will be forced to return in 8 seconds.
That's wonderful. It leaves us 6 minutes in this.
Sorry, 1 second.
Yeah.
Now everyone's forced back. I didn't read minutes.
That's okay. Great. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Sorry, Dick, you got stopped in mid sentence.
I think that happened a little bit, John.
Well, let me finish the sentence then. Fred Salfeld, the chief scientist at the Office of Naval Research, stood up and said, "This is no longer a project, this is a partnership." And the very next day, the name of the organization was changed from Federal Demonstration Project to Federal Demonstration Partnership, which I think is a much more accurate reflection of what we are.
It's great to see everybody back. I don't know about everyone else, but I feel like this hour has flown by. I really appreciate the conversation. I want, in the remaining 5 minutes that we have, I want to make sure we button up a little bit of the conversations that have been happening in the breakout rooms. And I don't know if it will be possible for myself and Robert and John to distill our conversations into a takeaway, but maybe we can give it a whirl. And then I just want to make sure, for those of you who are interested, I give you a heads up about some information we're going to be eliciting related to the search for a new executive director for those who can stay on. So I don't know, Robert, John, do you want to give it a whirl?
I'll give it a quick run.
Okay, go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, I'll go really quickly. The group really talked about the federal updates and how information could be shifted to be more forward-looking and funding priorities, big problems and things that are on the policy horizon, not just reporting out on things that have already happened, looking at other support, and then also looking at engagement between FDP member organizations, industry, and federal agencies. So those are the 3 themes. I'll send it to you by email. Thank you so much, Melissa, for capturing the notes.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'll be glad to just to highlight one thing that we talked about, that I think was the main thing we talked about in our session, and that is that it's possible to imagine that a problem worthy of a study by the National Research Council, NASEM, could originate with the FTP. I mean, I'm not aware that it has happened in the past, but it's in the tradition of the NRC that a roundtable such as GWIR, and we're after all linked to GWIR, can, although it can't issue policy advice and can't do consensus studies, it can generate ideas that can become the substance of studies. So if at some point the FDP identifies a significant issue that in the national interest would be a logical subject for a study, we could shop that and propose that be taken up by one of the programs in the NRC that can do studies.
Yeah, I don't think we've done it recently. I do think there was an example when David Robinson was on the sort of STARS committee around ARA funding several years ago, that we were connected to that, and some congressional testimony again around reducing workload burden, which was a theme in our session. So in our session, I took as careful notes as I could, but I think there's still a sense in this sort of future of work and research that, at least on the administrative side, we are still not making as much headway in reducing burden surrounding research as we would like to think that we are. I guess there's still an open debate, I'm editorializing now, as to whether or not, had FDP never been there, we would only watch, the mushroom cloud grow even bigger versus what we have right now, or are we just simply, it's sort of, we as soon as we push one thing down, something else emerges, and we're constantly responding. But there was a very good suggestion from our group that we need to train people up and really think about how to create a runway for career advancement in research administration that's much more apprentice-like and happens at an earlier stage of career, so that we can fast track an acceleration into the ranks that are being depleted by the Great Resignation. And, I thought there was also a really good idea that Neil brought forward, which is to think about, what does it really look like to retire on the faculty side? Are you truly retired, or is there a more iterative relationship that can be established between, the expertise that someone has and the way in which they connect both to their institutions and to their professions, that needs to be more intentional, I'm going to say it like that, than what we've currently had. So I think that's really a nice place to sort of land, because I think there are some things we can think further about and move on from that discussion. So I'm very appreciative of everyone staying with it. In the last minute, I just want to let all of you know that as you know, we're in the process of building out a position profile for a new executive director for the FDP. Dick Seligman, who's on our session here today, which I'm very grateful for, has stepped in as our interim executive director, and not a moment too soon, speaking exactly to the idea that Neil, I think, raised earlier, which is, what's that next chapter that can be relevant, for individuals as they think about what comes next. We set up a thought exchange, which is making its rounds through the committee structure of the FDP. I did not want to send it to the faculty committee without explaining what it is, but you will get some email from me inviting you to participate in an ongoing thought exchange. It's already been started. It was already completed by the executive committee, and there are now committees that are starting to send their membership to both react to the thoughts around the qualities and characteristics that we would like to see in a new executive director, as well as to add additional thoughts. So I'm going to be sending email to the faculty listserv and to the steering committee at the conclusion of the meetings this week to elicit your input on that thought exchange. I hope you'll take a minute to do it. It doesn't take long. It's going to ask you to do things like rate, whether you think it's important that somebody have strong communication skills versus experience as a research administrator and down that line, to begin to help us understand what our own membership is looking for in an executive director search. We will also over the summer be asking people to help us connect to our potential applicants and people that we'd like to reach out to who may have an interest in the position. So please do think about that in your networks and even for yourselves. If it's something you think you would be interested in, or if you know somebody who you think would be a good candidate for the role, don't hesitate to encourage them to think about the position once the position is actually posted. We'll be circulating it through our FDP membership. And we think in our discussions with a sort of informal advising that we're getting from a consultant on a search firm that, we probably already know the person who's in our network. We just have to get that person to join us in this really important leadership role. I want to make sure I give Robert an opportunity to say any last words before we sign off.
I just want to thank everybody for being here today. Y'all, 37 of you stayed with us all the way until 5:32 Eastern. That's remarkable. We miss you. I wish we could have a drink and go out to dinner. But I guess I will do that in the spirit of us not being together. I'll do that in memory of all of you on this great day. And happy belated Mother's Day to all the mothers out there.
And happy birthday to Robert.
Yeah, true story. Listen, I told my wife, I said, I don't know why FDP has their meeting so close to Mother's Day. I was like, I would never fly out on Mother's Day. And then she said, yeah, you've done that a couple of times already to go to FDP. So I'm like, really? So it's been so long, I don't even remember. But I miss all y'all.
Enjoy. I'll follow up by email on our working group related to the faculty workload survey. Thank you all so much for your time this afternoon. We are adjourned until tomorrow. Bye.
Have a great